Hi everyone, Nicole Moore, Accredited Dietitian here and founder of Menu Concepts. Today on my podcast, Low Carb Bites, I wanted to chat about another little hot topic that keeps sort of popping up, and that's about label reading. You know, there's so much out there in the supermarkets and we really just don't know what sort of things we should be maybe trying to grab. Particularly when we're in a rush and we're a bit time poor, it's sometimes important for us to actually use some of the products in the supermarket that are not necessarily real food. So when we talk about low carb and keto, we ideally are trying to get people to eat real food. So in our shopping trolley, we really should be having things like our healthy fats, which are things like butter, ghee, lard, olive oil, nuts and seeds. We should also trying to include good quality protein. So that's your meat and your chicken and your fish and your eggs and your full fat dairy. And then above ground vegetables, which are our sort of low carb, non-starchy vegetables, which is our, lettuce and cucumber and tomatoes and broccolini, etc., just not the below ground. So ideally we want to make our meals from real food, but it's just not always convenient. So, if we want to use a sauce to sort of create a quick casserole or stir fry, or if we want to use that, frozen cauliflower, broccoli cheese that we've found in the freezer section, or we want to, get a technically low carb product that says it's a low carb bread or it's a low carb frozen meal, how do we know? So to give us some flexibility and to give us some convenience, we need to be mindful of the labels. Now, when you see a label, you'll always see a per serve and a per 100 grams. And really the only thing I want you to look for is the total carbohydrate per serving. Now, when we look at carbohydrate on a label, they add the sort of complex starchy carbohydrate with the simple sugary carbohydrate. So e.g., you may have a biscuit and it's got, or a cracker, and it's got wheat flour in it, which is the starchy carbohydrate. And then they've also added a little bit of sugar, which is a sort of more simple sugary carbohydrate. They add that together and that is total carbohydrate. We know that carbohydrate is what's releasing sugar into our body. Particularly the sort of starchy carbohydrates like the flours and the breads and the pasta, the rice, potato are really just releasing pure glucose into the blood. There are other sort of different sugars, but if we look at total carbohydrate, we know all of those carbohydrates are going to break down to some form of sugar in our body. It might be fructose sugar, which impacts our liver. It might be glucose that goes into our blood and impacts our blood sugars and our insulin. So look at total carbohydrate only per serve. That's really all I want you to look for. And you really want something that's 5 grams of total carbohydrate or less per serving. 4 grams of carbohydrate is equivalent to a teaspoon of sugar going into your body. So if we keep it around that 5 gram mark, we know that product is really technically a low carb product and is not going to release too much glucose. And when we look at low carb, what we're really referring to is around about 50 grams of carbohydrate per day in total. And that carbohydrate is going to come from vegetables, it's still going to come from incidental sort of foods like dairy products and nuts. So to keep to 50 grams of carb, we want to make sure that we're reading our labels and that it is around that 5 grams, because you will find things like low carb breads, but they're still around 15 grams of carb. Or you might find a low carb cauliflower pizza base, but it's still got wheat flour in it. So when you read the ingredients, it's actually still got quite a lot of carb. You might find products that say no added sugar. Like you'll see in the supermarket, there'll be these no added sugar sweet biscuits and you'll think, great. But when you look closer, is that they've still got a lot of flour in them. So the flour is still carbohydrate, and 2 biscuits might, which is a serving, might be giving you still 20 grams of carbohydrate, which if our budget's 50 is really going to blow up. And that 20 grams of carbohydrate is, around 4 teaspoons of actual sugar that's going into your body. So be very mindful to check total carbohydrate per serve. Try to keep it around the 5. If it's a little bit higher, then you've just got to think about the scheme of your day and how much carbohydrate you are having. I'll often suggest, particularly if you're beginning this journey or you're just not really sure how much carbohydrate you're having, is to actually start tracking on an app. And there's lots of different apps out there. A lot of them are free, and they'll allow you to sort of plug in what you eat through the day, and it will add up your carbs over the day, and it will show you what foods you're eating and how much carb is in each food. So that helps you sort of understand, how much carbohydrate you're having in a food. But you can also now sort of go to your label. You might pick up 2 different yogurts, or 2 different low carb breads, or 2 different products, and compare total carb in a serving per and see where it's at. Now, sometimes you'll hear people talking about looking at per 100 grams, and you can do that too, because at the end of the day, if you compare products per 100 grams and look at total carb, you can at least choose ones with the lowest. But I always like per serving, because then you can think about how much of that serving are you going to have. Maybe per serving in those 5 servings in a box, and you think, wow, I'm going to eat half a box, so I'm actually going to eat 2.5 servings. Then you can multiply the total carb per serving by how many servings you're going to have, and suddenly you might go, oh, that particular product is low carb, but technically in a serving it's 5 grams, but I'm going to have 3 servings because they're not very big, and suddenly it's 15 grams. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of information of how you can really decipher a label. So anywhere you are in a supermarket, check your total carbohydrate per serve, not the sugar, and try to get it under 5. If it's under 10, it's not so bad, if you're keeping to your sort of tally of around that 50 grams of carb a day. And again, it's just about being mindful of, when you're in the supermarket, and it will give you some flexibility with adding some more convenience foods like a sauce or a dressing, just to add flavor, or, buying a marinated meat that creates a really quick and easy meal, but you can look at the carbs and see that it's not too high. Always remember when you're shopping, if you shop on the outside of the supermarket, you're going to get most of the real food, the fish and the seafood and the eggs, and you're going to get the dairy, full fat dairy products, and the vegetables, and the nuts and seeds. It's when you sort of go inside into the inner circles of the supermarket that the processing begins. And you're going to get a lot of processed foods with a lot of hidden carbohydrate in them. So always try to stick to the outside of the aisles if you can, but if you need to go into the middle, just be mindful of checking your total carbohydrate, and don't be fooled by things like low glycemic or by no added sugar. Low glycemic just means that the carbohydrate is released slower. So if you've got something that's low GI, it still may have a lot of carbohydrate in it, but it's just released slower. It's a bit like a white potato and a sweet potato. A sweet potato has got the tag of low GI, so it releases the carbohydrate slower, but whether it's white or sweet potato, it's still very high in carbohydrate. So low GI is one of those kind of claims that you'll see that can be misleading. You will see claims that say no added sugar, and these products may still be based on flour or rice, so therefore they're still high in carb. They might be slightly lower compared to a similar product that has the sugar in there, but often they can still be high, sort of high in carb, like I mentioned with the low carb sort of sweet biscuits. So don't be fooled by, be mindful of low GI, be mindful of no added sugar. In fact, some products can say no added sugar, but they have a lot of honey added or natural sugar, so therefore they're still claiming no added sugar because they haven't added white table sugar, but they've added actually still quite a lot of honey, or fruit concentrates, which are still sugars. So low GI, watch out for no added sugar, and still be mindful of low carb, because sometimes that they'll say lower carb because compared to the original product it's still lower, but it's not low carb. And when you read it and you think, okay, it's still 15-20 grams of carb in a serve, it might be less than the original higher carb product, but it's still definitely not going to fit into your carb budget and will blow your carb bank. And again, then you get sort of the claims of fat-free, and we know we're not trying to go low fat. So if you see a fat-free product, just go straight and look at the total carb per serve. Be mindful of, that it might be no fat, and we really want fat anyway. We're not scared of fat, but low-fat products have loads of sugar often added, so you're doing more damage, because remember, as we've talked in previous podcasts, sugar and carbohydrate are the things that create inflammation and damage in our body, and insulin resistance, which is where the fat issue comes from. It's not fat. But, at least if you're looking at anything with a claim and you can look at the total carb, you'll know straight away what you're dealing with and whether that's going to fit into your trolley, so to speak. So be mindful of reading your labels. Be mindful of shopping on the outside. Be mindful of any health claims that you may read and what they truly do mean. Hopefully that gives you a little bit more guidance as to how you can choose products and add some convenience to your life if need, without blowing your carb budget. So I hope you've really enjoyed it today. Please visit my website, menuconcepts.com.au. I've got a lot of low carb resources and literature there. I look forward to chatting to you again soon. Bye.